going to do a quick reading from the book Faith by A.C. Ping. I always get that wrong. It's a really pretty book that's, it's kind of deep, but it's a bunch of small, different essays on topics related to faith. So, I'm going to read the one entitled Forgive Yourself tonight, and I hope you will excuse my somewhat scratchy voice because I have a bit of a cold. So yeah, just going to jump into it. Forgive yourself. Notice the difference between what happens when a man says to himself, I have failed 3 times, and what happens when he says, I am a failure. And that's a quote by S.I. Hayakawa, and it starts the chapter. We all make mistakes. It's a simple fact of life. We all do things from time to time that we are not proud of. I talked about letting yourself off the hook in Be and Do, which are other books that he has written. But there is a faith aspect to this as well. Jason was a nice guy who had one major failing. When he was stressed, he used to lose his temper easily, and in frustration would yell at his girlfriend. When it happened the first time, he apologized profusely once he had calmed down, and resolved never to do it again. But a couple of weeks later, after a hard day at work, he got into a petty argument about putting out the trash and started yelling again. The next morning, he'd calmed down, and once again he apologized and resolved to not lose control again. But 1 month later, just as he'd felt he'd gotten on top of it, after a sleepless night due to a sick child, he found himself yelling at his girlfriend again. Again, after calming himself down, he apologized and said he wouldn't do it again. But this time he started to doubt himself. He started to wonder if indeed he was simply an angry, out-of-control man. His faith in himself and his ability to get over his issue began to waver. The next time it happened, he gave up on himself. He resigned himself to the fact that he couldn't control his temper. He blamed his girlfriend for his outbursts, and slowly he drove her away. From then on, his story about himself was a very negative one, and he continued to create situations where he simply lost his temper, until it became not only a judgment, but a habit. Having faith in yourself means having faith that no matter what personal failings you see in yourself, you believe you can overcome them. We mustn't be afraid of our dark side. If we start to believe negative judgments about ourselves, we effectively lock ourselves in a little box that quickly becomes hard to get out of. If we argue for our limitations, then, yes, we get to keep them. Are you telling your story about yourself that you are not good enough or that you are a failure in some way? We are all on a journey. Few of us can say that we are just the way we want to be right now. Many of us are faced with situations where we love someone, whether it be a partner, parent, friend, child, but they bring up a side of us that we simply don't like. Many of us are our harshest critics, and this can be especially so if you're trying to pursue a spiritual path. Once again, we need to change the story. Remember that we are all created with divine potential. We can all do amazing things. We are all God's children. If we buy into harsh judgments of ourselves, then not only do we deny ourselves the opportunity to work on these things, we also cop out on our responsibility. We give ourselves an excuse for why we are doing these things, and in turn we send ourselves down a road that becomes harder and harder to turn back from. Gloria got married when she was very young. Not long after she married, her boyfriend got in with a bad crowd and started habitually smoking marijuana. I'm going to break from the story right there just for a second, just to say that me reading this does not reflect any sort of judgment. I don't think that if you smoke marijuana, you're in a bad crowd. Yeah, I have nothing against pot at all, to be totally honest. So I just wanted to say that in the middle of that because, you know, this is part of the writing and the spiritual teaching, but personally, Scooter Whispering has no problem and or opinion on marijuana, and Scooter Whispering has no judgment of what is the right or wrong crowd. And, I have I have my own spiritual beliefs in God, but, I am not meaning this to have any sort of religious slant in any way other than a spiritual one. So, the disclaimer is over and I'll get back to reading. Gloria got married when she was very young. Not long after she married, her boyfriend got in with a bad crowd and started habitually smoking marijuana. Gloria had never liked the stuff, but she really wanted to fit in, so she started smoking as well. Before long, she found that she really needed to have a smoke at the end of the day. When she visited her parents on her own for Christmas, she tried not to smoke, but after a few drinks, she found that she really, really needed to smoke. So she snuck outside to have a quick joint. Relieved, but now stoned, she crept back to the Christmas party, only to be confronted by her 14-year-old niece, who peered oddly at her and then laughed. Gloria freaked out. How could I be such a bad person? She wondered. When she returned home, she didn't tell her husband what had happened, but the thought of it haunted her. He noticed the change in her. She seemed different, less self-confident. When he asked her about simple things like whether or not she had paid the bills, her responses were angry, and the resulting fights always seemed to end up with her accusing him of thinking she wasn't good enough for him. Slowly she drove him away, which just served to reinforce her that she was indeed not good enough. Gloria tried to remain single, but another boyfriend came along. Self-doubts plagued her, and although she tried to hide it from him, their arguments began to end in the same way. You don't think I'm good enough for you, she would scream. He was perplexed. He loved her, but he couldn't understand why she kept saying these things. Try as she might, her story about herself and the judgment she had came to rule her life. We must forgive ourselves for our failings, but we must also have the courage to face up to them. Only by shining a light into the darkest corners of our personalities do we give ourselves the opportunity to heal. But we cannot be afraid of ourselves. We cannot try to push our dark side into a little bottle, push the stopper down, and then hide away at the back of a cupboard. The interconnected nature of all of us means that on some level, we feel it when someone is hiding something. Face your harshest judgments about yourself. Have faith that anything can be solved if you have the will and the courage to do something about it. Hiding from the world doesn't serve you or us. Your pain is our pain, remember? Your happiness is our happiness. If one person is down, then we are all down. So that was a nice little chapter. I'm going to find another one really quick. Just to quickly kind of give us something else to go on. So this video is a little bit longer. Okay, so this chapter is entitled, We Are All Emotional, Not Rational. What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and the world remains and is immortal. And that's a quote by Albert Pine to begin this chapter. I know this is all a bit technical and in the head, but what I'm trying to present to you here is a more rational argument for something that is an esoteric concept. I hope you can bear with me, as I think it is important to present to you a reason-based argument so that the rational side of your mind can understand why faith is important. Otherwise, when you are confronted with purely rational fears and doubts, you will have nothing to refute those fears other than what could be called lofty concepts. Excuse me. Anyway, let's have a look at what's wrong with the current system that dominates the world today. Free market economics. Boring, yes, I know, but again, please bear with me. Free market economics is based on the assumption that we are all rational beings. That if we are faced with a choice between one brand of widget costing $1 versus another brand costing $2, we will choose the cheaper one. However, philosophers have coined the term rational fool to describe the person who makes short-term decisions for their own benefit without taking into account the long-term implications of those decisions. I think that in the Western world we have become masters of creating rational fools. Free market economics is a beautiful theory that makes perfect sense when viewed through idealistic eyes. Why wouldn't we want to support a system that gives all of us the ability to choose from a variety of different products, all delivered to us at the best possible price? To be free to work for whomever we want at the highest negotiated wages, and to be free to invest in whatever we want. Freedom and equality, that's what it's all about, and who could possibly argue with it? Great idea, but let's look at the reality. Am I being cynical if I suggest the real values driving our society, now that free market philosophy is at its heart, are greed and fear? I know it's an outrageous suggestion, but consider the facts. We are all little pawns in the free market system, desperately trying to look after ourselves while competing against everyone else. Take the example of layoffs. We are all trying to outdo each other so we don't lose our jobs. Our promotions. We are all trying to get on the corporate ladder, make more money, and have more assets. Why? Money talks. The more money you have, the more you can protect yourself from the nasty elements of society. You can drive a car to work instead of catching the bus. You can have private health insurance instead of having to depend on Medicaid or get by with no coverage at all. You can live in a place that has security entrances, and so on. The more money you have, the more opportunities you can recreate for yourself and your offspring. You can afford to join private clubs where you can meet people who make good business contacts or who give you little snippets of inside information. I'm going to stop because there's a siren going. I live on a really busy street, so there's usually a lot of sirens. Okay. You can send your children to private schools, buy them a place in college, afford to send them overseas for exposure to other cultures, and eventually get them a job in a corporation run by one of the people you've met at your private club. That's all fair, isn't it? I don't know. I think it's more like the line in the movie Wall Street. You're either on the inside or the outside. There's nothing in between. The problem is that we all know there's nothing in between, so we all fear that we could be left on the outside. We'd really like to be able to care about the people who are left on the outside, but we're too busy trying to make sure that we stay on the inside. Ho-hum. If we could only live in the world of Star Trek, where there are unlimited resources and no need for a system of uneven competitive distribution. Because of our fears, here's another siren. It's not very relaxing now. Because of our fears, we are happy to do the things that intuitively we wouldn't want to have done to us. We lay people off, push people to work harder, and cut as many corners as we can so the company we work for can make as much money as possible so that we can keep our jobs and maybe even get a pay raise. We are always chasing that dangling carrot. Along the way, we are bombarded by all manner of messages that reinforce the fact that we need to have more things. Because let's face it, if you're working your ass off for some corporation, then you need to have something to prove you... Sorry. There must be something kind of serious going on. And I don't have time to redo this video and upload it without the sirens, so I apologize. So, along the way, we are bombarded by all manner of messages that reinforce the fact that we need to have more things. Because let's face it, you're working your ass off for some corporation, then you need to have something to provide you with a sense that you really are successful. Things like new cars, big houses, and lots of the latest cool trinkets and gadgets. Every day we see hundreds of advertisements showing us how happy we could be if we could just have a big screen TV, a new BMW, some nice new clothes, and maybe even a cell phone that takes pictures. So what is the effect of all of this, and what has this got to do with faith? Well, instead of being rational, our emotions drive us. Unfortunately, fear and greed dominate the world, and they are the emotions that start to control us. We fear that if someone else has more, then we will have less. We fear that if we don't look after ourselves, no one else will. Greed drives us to have more and more and more. The result? Are we now afraid of each other? If someone starts to talk to you on a train, do you become suspicious of their motives? If someone makes eye contact with you as you pass them in the street, do you greet them or do you look away? If we are afraid of each other, then what sort of world are we creating via our collective beliefs? So that was the chapter on We Are All Emotional, Not Rational. Again, these are from the book Faith by A.C. Ping. And just a little comment on the last part that I read. I do think that he definitely has some good points in there, but I do also think that, there are many people that do jobs that aren't part of a corporation or aren't driven by greed, but I do think that greed and fear are really, really poisonous things. And as humans in society, we're all guilty of it to some degree, and it's hard to avoid it, and it's hard to not be part of that system in some way, shape, or form. But I think he has a really good point when he says that, how do we act with fear or do we act with love? And, I try to keep that in the forefront of my head to act with love instead of fear, and not have fear be my first go-to. Of course, people have to keep themselves safe. Obviously, there are many things that have gone on in the world that have would make someone feel very unsafe. But I guess that's the point of having faith that things will work out okay. But I also very much understand why people are afraid. And so, I just wanted to kind of comment on a couple of those things, because while I do think this is a very valuable book, I don't always, I like to think critically about what I read and take in, and especially what I would put out into the world as messaging. And I think this is a little bit harsh, trying to get the point driven home. And I don't think that everybody is driven by greed in the world. Maybe I'm naive, but I like to think that there are some people out there that aren't necessarily driven that way. And I think that the ASMR community, for a big part of it, is kind of demonstrative of that. Actually, that people are out doing some of these things just to help other people relax, and to help other people feel welcomed, and to help other people feel understood. And I think that that's an awesome thing. And there's little money involved in it. And I think that that's amazing. So I hope you enjoyed this readings. I'm probably not going to read from this book again, because it's as I started reading it, I'm kind of like, I haven't read it in a long time, and I think that maybe it's just a little bit off. So I probably won't read from this one again. But if you have any suggestions of books that you would like read, and I happen to have them in my arsenal, I will definitely read from them. So maybe I'll make a short video right now just showing some of the books I have, and you can pick one. Alright, have a great evening. Bye.